This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 208.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramzi Marjaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. I had my good friend Chris back, and Kerry Skolsky joined as well. So it was great talking to both of these great SE thought leaders, and they're doing something different. Sales engineering seems like it's an emerging market for a lot of different vendors out there. We didn't talk specifically about vendors, but there are a lot of vendors that, if I'm going to name right now, it might take me the entire session. The good news is they're creating a report. So if someone's out there curious about what there is out there in terms of vendors for pre-sales, whether it's for demoing, whether it's for data management or whatever it is, Kerry and Chris are working on a report together, which should be out in a week or so. But you can go in and sign up to their waiting list so you can receive it as soon as they're ready. We talk about all these different vendors and what they bring to the table and how they work and their experiences meeting with them while doing their research. And so it was an interesting chat to talk about those, and they will introduce themselves again if you don't know who they are. If you do, this should be an easy conversation. So that's it. Let's just jump into the show, and I'll see you after the show. Good morning, Kerry and Chris. How you guys doing?
Very well, sir. Thank you.
Excellent. Good morning, Ramzi. How are you?
I'm excited. Two of my favorite SE leaders are on the same Zoom thing, Majig.
Flattery will get you everywhere, my friend.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm happy you guys are here. So people should know you, and if they don't, there's something wrong. But let's do a brief intro, maybe starting with you, Chris. Who you are, what you do, and how many times have you been on this podcast?
Well, I think I've been with you, is it 6 or 7 times now?
I stopped counting. We'll put the links in the show notes for. That's
really an honor. I do sort of feel like I'm just visiting an old friend. So yes, my name, of course, is Chris White, in case any of your listeners don't know me. And I'm somewhat well known for a book I published a few years ago called The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers. And I run a training organization called Tech Sales Advisors. And I've actually been collaborating with the other gentleman with us today, Mr. Kerry Skolsky, who I know will introduce himself in a minute. And we're excited to talk about this collaboration.
Awesome. All right. Kerry, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, I guess, for everybody that's watching and the recording as well. Kerry Skolsky, I am the co-founder and president of Presales Mastery, which is a demo coaching business. So unlike the amazing training that Chris does, which is mostly sort of workshop type driven, I work one-on-one with individual SEs on upping their demo delivery, coaching calls they've actually, or demos they've actually delivered to prospects. So kind of like call coaching for demos. And sort of little mini side gig. I'm the co-founder of SE Nation Toronto's chapter, the Sales Engineers in Toronto. So excited with that. Just more exposure for our space in the Toronto community. And yeah, Chris and I have been collaborating on this. Frankly, we've collaborated on a bunch of stuff over the last year and a half or so, but over the last half year, we've got this pretty exciting project we're excited to talk to you about today, Ramzi.
All right. By the way, when's the next SE Toronto thing?
Should be sometime in mid-May. We're looking forward to hopefully having our first in-person event, thankfully.
In May. All right.
When is that? That's in May, Kerry?
Hopefully, yeah. We haven't set the exact date yet, but it'll be sometime in May.
Okay. Let me know. I'd love to come down and meet the.
Oh, you'll know.
Awesome. All right. So you're collaborating on something. First off, I mean, you guys are both capable of doing a lot of things on your own. Why did you decide to collaborate with each other? Kerry, maybe you started us off this time.
Chris and I, it was sort of one of those rare personalities where you just sort of instantly click with each other. And I think I originally called Chris up out of the blue after connecting with him, and we immediately were sort of birds of a feather. We recognized, and about a little less than a year ago, I had sort of seen a lot of these new vendors popping up in the pre-sale space and thought, wow, it'd be really cool to do sort of a vendor evaluation type of thing, like a Gartner market scope. And one of the people that used to work for me at IBM and Verisant runs a couple different sort of sales spaces within Gartner and writes market scopes. And so I was thinking of her, and I contacted her and said, is there anything on Gartner's radar around pre-sales? And she said no. And I said, okay. But she did warn me that these are massive undertakings. And while I appreciate that you're very complimentary of Chris and I being able to do stuff on our own, this really is a massive, massive project that I don't think either of us really had a quite grasp of exactly how much work it was going to be. So I'm really glad that I reached out to Chris early on and said, do you have any interest in doing this? And thankfully he did. And so here we are almost 6 months later.
Well, and if I can add to that too, Ramzi, I mean, honestly, not entirely unlike the AESE relationship, right? I mean, Carrie and I have, as you might guess, we have different strengths. I mean, he does demo coaching by reviewing recorded demos. I do training by standing up in front of groups of people, and waving my arms for 4 hours. So, I mean, we have different skill sets, and that has, 1 + 1 has been, 3 or 4 or 5. There have been certain things that he's done where I found myself thinking, man, thank goodness he's involved in this, because I wouldn't be that organized. And I'd like to think there's been a thing or two that I've done that maybe he's had a similar thought. So I think it's really been beneficial. The other thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. So we've met, there's about 20 vendors participating. We've met twice with each vendor. The first was sort of a company overview and sort of their thinking on the market and that sort of thing. The second was an actual demo. And we both attended all of those. I think I missed 1 or 2, but for the most part, we both attended all those. We both heard slightly different things, right? And we were able to sort of, coagulate and, our what we heard and our perspective. So there's no chance this would have happened if I tried to do this alone. And I don't know, Carrie might have gotten it done without me, but for the two of us, it's really been a great experience for me to see the power of that, of a partnership.
Okay, nice. Can we take a step back and maybe explain a little bit of what it is that you guys tried to do? Because we were talking about what you did. I want to understand what it is to begin with. And I don't know who wants to take this one.
I usually defer to Carrie unless there's something burning a hole in my head that has to get out. So Carrie, do you want to take it first?
Sure. Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, so we noticed that over the last couple of years, there's been, I mean, as most people probably have, it's hard to miss it. Over the last couple of years, there's really been an explosion in terms of investment in and the launch of pre-sales focused solutions. So these are technology solutions aimed primarily at the pre-sales, either individual contributor or leadership. And this is somewhat unique because this space has been very neglected for a long time. I mean, we in pre-sales are pretty talented. And so we've made do for the most part by cobbling together our own tools. And frankly, it's kind of ironic because a bunch of these solutions came about as a result of some SEs actually building their own tools internally and then realizing they had something that was applicable. So knowing that there was this new explosion in the space, lots of new vendors coming into it, we recognized that two things were really prevalent. One is there was a bit of an awareness gap in the market. There was not a ton of awareness amongst the pre-sales buying community about which vendors were out there. There were some that spent and had done a really good job at marketing themselves and playing the social media game and getting their names out there and partnering with, the thought leaders in the space and others. But there were a bunch that were still sort of focused on the product and hadn't really gotten out there. And so there was, aside from the top vendors, not terribly well known across the market. The second was there was a clarity gap. And what I mean by that is, of the vendors that were known, it wasn't exactly clear what each of them actually did, or the scope of their capabilities and the types of use cases that they could address. And so Chris and I got together and thought this would be really interesting if we could sort of fill in those awareness and clarity gaps in the market, let people know what's out there. So essentially helping the vendors get their message out to the market more effectively, more clearly. But then the converse side of that is we also wanted to be able to help pre-sales leaders and sales leaders make more informed buying decisions. Buying software is a challenging exercise that most of us only probably do once or twice in our lifetimes, depending on what our role is. Very infrequently do we do that. And so most of us are inexperienced software buyers, as I like to call it, and don't necessarily know what to look for, what questions to ask, where there are pitfalls. And so we wanted to help pre-sales leaders who are finally getting the chance to be able to have tools at their disposal, make sure that they're making the right decisions the first time around.
Chris, anything you'd like to add?
Just at the end of the day, the pre-sales buyer's guide does two things. Number one, it helps the players and really it enables the vendors in this space to get their message out to this community and to this market in a concise, direct manner. Number two, it helps pre-sales buyers, so pre-sales leaders, sales leaders who are considering investing in automation for their pre-sales teams. It gives them a place to go before they even consider what vendors to look for. It gives them a place to go to help understand the landscape and understand the market and really the benefit, the challenges that these tools are designed to address and the benefits they can expect to realize as a result.
So when someone looks at you guys, and the thing that they see is that, Chris, you're a trainer, you help SEs get better at sales engineering in general. Carrie, you're a coach focused on demos. And I know you said you want to do this to help the SE community, whether it's the vendors or the buyers. But what drove you to want to actually spend more? I mean, I know, Chris, you work almost 27 hours a day. And Carrie, we haven't talked about it, but we talked about how much work you have. Why would you want to spend more time working to do this?
It's honestly a question I think we've both been trying to answer for ourselves for the better part of 3 or 4 months. The first thought that comes to mind, Ramzi, is we sincerely saw a gap in the market, and we wanted to step in and fill that gap. That was number one. Being fully transparent, we thought there was a revenue opportunity here. And to be very clear, so far, there's zero revenue involved. None of the vendors have paid to participate, and we are not going to charge for the report. So this has sincerely become, a massive, quote, volunteer effort on our part for the good of the community. Now, is this something that we hope will draw more attention to our businesses? Of course, right? And are we considering revenue potential or revenue opportunities sort of, downstream? Of course we are. But I think sort of in the, or from the perspective of a true typical sales engineer, I see a problem. We see a problem. We saw a problem. We saw a need. Let's go fill the gap. And I think that was really the driver.
Okay. All right. So this is going to be maybe a ridiculous question, but out of all the demos that you've had, how hard was it for you not to jump in and correct them on their way of doing things? Or because you guys are the experts, right? Like,
Go ahead, Carrie. I'll let you start with this one.
Yeah, I'm sure we could both jump at this for about half an hour. So we did Zoom meetings with everybody, obviously, and invariably at the end of each of these meetings, the vendor would drop off, and Chris and I would stay on and debrief on what we had absorbed and seen and thought. And almost to a T, I think we were, for most of the vendors, we were rather surprised, I'll put it that way, that solutions that were for the most part built by people in pre-sales, directed and sold to people in pre-sales, and being demoed to a pre-sales coach and trainer were not as well delivered as we would have expected. I guess is the nice way to put it. It was interesting. Yeah. So we found ourselves, I think we both did this because we both took copious notes during these particular these calls, is we found ourselves making notes on their messaging, their delivery, their value props, the product that they were showing us, their demo models they were using with which to show it, to the point where we actually have a fairly extensive set of feedback for these vendors on how they can improve their delivery, their messaging, their product, et cetera, where we've already spoken to a few of them. They're going to take us up on, basically hiring us to give them that type of feedback. So it's kind of ironic. It was certainly top of mind for us.
And if I may, the other side of that coin, I have a couple thoughts. First of all, to Carrie's point, these are pre-sales professionals who have built pre-sales tools for a pre-sales target market, and yet they even struggled certainly at times at giving a compelling sort of value focused meaningful demo, which just draws attention to the fact of how bloody hard this role is and how bloody hard this job is, right? So let's just start there. The second is we were really impressed with all of the products, and all of the products have capabilities that are of significant benefit to organizations. We were really impressed with all the people that we met with. And honestly, I think there were probably a time or two, if not more, where both Carrie and I were finding ourselves thinking, why in the world did we not get into that part of this business instead of this? Because really, I mean, it's such a wide open space and there's such a need. And look, that we have seen some really compelling capabilities, some really clever ways of automating and scaling some of the things that we do. So look, is there arguably room for improvement? Of course there is, for crying out loud. Carrie actually did a demo coaching of one of my demos, about a year ago, and he had feedback to give me. So, I don't think any of us are above it, but there's some really impressive capabilities that I think people are going to be excited to learn about and hear about.
Okay. So Chris, who had the best demo? If you can single one out, can you think of anybody? Or you don't want to say that?
I can't. I'm not going to divulge.
Oh,
I'm not sure. I would say there are probably, we create, and I think it'd be worthwhile to talk about the five. We're calling them focus areas or five subcategories that sort of emerged as a result of doing this. We didn't enter this project thinking there were five categories. In fact, we entered this project thinking we were going to have more of a funnel sort of, like stages of a funnel framework, and then a framework for management and oversight. But what we ended up with was five subcategories, and we'll talk about that. But that being said, I would say there were probably one or two in each of the subcategories that sort of rose to the top. But of course, we're not going to call out any individual vendor by name.
Oh, I wasn't going to ask who's the best product. I just want to see who we can learn from. If someone wants to see a demo from someone, a good demo, but we can talk about that offline if you want, or not at all. So let's talk. The next question was going to be what are the categories? What are the problems that are being solved by these different vendors? Because most of us don't even know that there are vendors out there. Well,
so I'll start, and then I'll let Carrie come behind. As I mentioned, there were five subcategories, and as it turns out, I ended up focusing on 3 of the 5 subcategories and the vendors that are in those 3 categories. And Carrie took 2 of them. And as it worked out, we ended up with 19 in the formal report. I ended up with 9 of the vendors in those 3 categories. And Carrie ended up actually with 10 vendors in his 2. So the 2, or rather the 3 subcategories that I focused on, first was pre-sales, oversight, and management. And some of the use cases are things like team management, onboarding, enabling, scaling pre-sales, playbook development and creation, best practices creation, pre-sales activity and utilization oversight, right? Tracking activities, pipeline visibility and forecasting, and then really just managing what we're sort of notionally calling pre-sales master data. So products and inventory in some cases, physical inventory, just customers and that sort of thing. So skill sets, et cetera. Those are solutions that address the needs of SE leaders and managers. The second category is pre-sales, what we're calling pre-sales opportunity execution. You might also think of it as pre-sales opportunity automation. This is things like pre-sales, just opportunity data capture and data management, whether it's capturing information during discovery, maybe putting together information, for a demo. Structured pre-sales methodology guidance. So things like proof of value and proof of concept plans, task management and prioritization. A number of the tools in this bucket, literally they have your as an individual contributor, you open up your dashboard and there's your top list of priorities. Evaluation management, right? Just managing all the moving parts of an eval. The ability to identify product gaps and communicate back to the product teams, and then just internal and external collaboration. Some of the products even have a collaboration portal with customers. The third bucket or third subcategory that I had is response and knowledge management. So this is sort of typically thought of as like RFP, RFX management, the ability to ingest questions, automatically match against common, responses. But then there's also the ability to just, I think one of the vendors said, we solve the let me get back to you problem because I can click and get an answer right now out of the response management repository. So those are the 3 areas that I focused on: pre-sales oversight and management, pre-sales opportunity execution. And by the way, those 2 are close cousins. Most of the vendors in one are also in the, or most of the tools in one are also in the other. And then response and knowledge management. Carrie had 2 other subcategories. Let's turn it over to him, and then Ramzi, we'll come back to you for any questions.
Thanks, Chris. So the other 2 categories that I covered were demo automation, which a lot of people are probably familiar with. It was the most populous of the categories that we had. Fully about a third of the vendors fell into this category. And this is anything around sort of the idea of an automated either demo itself, demo environment that could be shared with someone, with a prospect, or even sort of an automated guided tour through the product. And the use cases that demo automation addresses are fairly broad. At its core, it certainly starts with the ability to enable enterprise and complex solutions to start to get into product-led growth, really focusing on buyer enablement rather than selling motions, and getting the product in front of the prospect much quicker in the sales cycle with less qualification, less gating. They certainly address the idea of scaling your team. When we think about the fact that, I think the latest study I saw that came out last month was that there's 121,000 open job recs for pre-sales worldwide right now. There are not enough people to fill those spots. So scaling teams is critical. And when you scale a team, there's sort of 2 ways you can do it. You can add more bodies, and that's a challenge, obviously, or you can make yourself more efficient in what you're doing. And so a lot of what these demo automation tools do, which is really nice, is they can eliminate a lot of these unqualified demos. There's been studies by a couple of vendors that as many as 30 to 50% of demos in some organizations are totally unqualified. So if we can eliminate all of those by sharing an automated demo experience, then that's a huge bandwidth increase and improvement for those SEs that are already on the team, and allows them to stretch themselves further. So reducing unqualified demos, big one. Big challenge for a lot of organizations is sort of the demo infrastructure issues, where a lot of times pre-sales doesn't own their own demo infrastructure. And so they can't get new instances spun up as quickly as they'd like. The cloud team or product team or the IT team that manages it doesn't work with the same sense of urgency and velocity that sales requires when we need to spin up a new demo instance immediately for a POC or a new demo where we want to customize something. Hard to do. And so these solutions can help alleviate the need to rely on third parties for those instances by basically hosting them for you. There's a challenge around consistent delivery, right? Most organizations want to be able to ensure that across the globe that the demos that their prospects are experiencing have the same amount of quality in terms of messaging and the types of demo models that are being used are the right quality, et cetera. And so demo automation makes sure that you can standardize across the organization more easily. Reducing build times for organizations that do things like POCs, POVs, and have to do a lot of building. These solutions can help lower that build sort of bar by creating a bunch of starting assets by industry, by persona, by use case that can be used as a starting point. And then they also help with a really interesting tool, which is this concept of inorganic stakeholder discovery. When we think about the fact that most buying committees keep getting bigger, Gartner keeps coming out with a new average number of people on the buying team and the buying committee, what we're pitching to, making sure that we're able to reach and address the needs of each of those particular stakeholders on our prospects is absolutely critical and hard to do because a lot of time we don't know who they are. And what's really neat about these tools is they facilitate internal sharing of your demo assets. And so you can actually find those people much easier. The other thing you can do is understand how they're interacting with these particular demo assets. So you know what they're looking for and where they're spending time. So when they do get in front of you, you can have much more informed discussions. So that's demo automation. The other one that I worked on was in a way a bit of a catch-all. We called it presentation and data tools. But interestingly, all the other vendors that fell into this really do enhance the idea of how we actually present our particular solutions, whether it's allowing us to demo non-visual solutions by creating these complex 3D type models for solutions that may not otherwise have an interface that's obvious to demo. Could be things like simplifying multi-persona demos. We're all probably familiar with having multiple browser windows open or different browser types because we have to log into different people, or incognito windows even. And those provide for a very disjointed demo experience for the end user. There are tools out there that allow SEs to do everything within a single browser and not have to worry about multiple logins. Things like in-meeting collaboration and effectiveness. Sales is a team sport. Chris talks about that a lot in his partnering concept in his book. And it is absolutely critical, not only that you partner before, but also during your presentations. And yet it can be difficult to do that. There's, switching back and forth between who's presenting, who's not, capturing questions, making sure that you're able to chat with each other behind the scenes in case something's going off the rails or you need to tell someone something that you've noticed that your sales partner hasn't, or vice versa. There are tools that are out there now that are really cool that help us basically do all of those things. Better collaboration behind the scenes, seamless delivery, allowing each individual in the sales team to control whatever's on the screen at any given time. So if someone disconnects, the other person can pick it up really easily. Really interesting tools that are out there. And then there's other ones that do things like take care of the challenge that we have a lot of the times in pre-sales where we have these really great solutions and really cool demo models. The problem is we don't have the data to support them. And when we talk about we talked about unsophisticated buyers earlier, prospects are unsophisticated buyers too. They don't really know what they don't know, and they really need to be able to understand how their specific use cases will be addressed and represented in your solutions to be successful. If we're showing dummy data that's not representative of real world situations, or even worse, the data doesn't exist, the chart doesn't even show up when you click on that report, that can kill your demo. And so there are solutions out there now that help organizations pre-populate in real time really representative data to make the demo experience that much more realistic. So those were the two categories that I focused on: demo automation and presentation and data tools.
Okay, all right. So the 5 subcategories, I'm going to just list them quickly: pre-sales oversight and management, pre-sales opportunity execution / automation, knowledge management, response and knowledge management, demo automation, and presentation and data tools. Is that?
Got it.
So for the first 3 that, Chris, you worked on, I can see the value, but a lot of SE leaders or sales leaders would say, oh, that's a spreadsheet. Why are we complicating things? Or that's Salesforce. Just use Salesforce, for crying out loud. Why would people want to invest in this to begin with? I mean, it's a cool tool, but why do we end up buying it?
Well, I mean, I think that's the operative question, honestly, for any software, right? And I would certainly submit to anybody listening to this or anybody considering investing in one of these platforms, don't do it because, quote, it's a cool tool. Why you asked quite a few questions there. Why this? Why not Salesforce? First of all, pre-sales, we have our own process separate from sales. We have our own stages. There's information that we need to both capture and track when we have the primary responsibility, or at least have a primary responsibility in the sales engagement that doesn't necessarily belong in or doesn't need to be in the CRM. More importantly, and particularly, let's talk about pre-sales opportunity execution. The tools really are designed to help pre-sales function better and capture all their information in one place, follow a predefined set of best practices, collaborate effectively with colleagues. An example is assists. So we have a number of the platforms that we looked at can request, an individual can request an assist from a fellow colleague, right? And that shows up as, some sort of request. I may go in and set up some server, or maybe, answer some question, or design some demo flow or something of that nature. But then that individual gets credit when the manager or the leader is doing some analysis on the activity for the month or for the quarter, who's contributing where, who's contributing in ways that lead to successful closes. He or she has visibility into all that information. And to me, that's the difference. Why not a spreadsheet? A spreadsheet won't let you do all the, it doesn't come close to capturing and keeping up with the complexity of our jobs, nor does the CRM. So we have a unique set of responsibilities. We have a unique set of activities, and we need a unique set of tools to both help us and track what we're doing so that it can be better reported on to management.
And Ramzi, I want to add one thing to what Chris said, which is Chris and I are well aware of this because we sell into pre-sales organizations, but pre-sales very often does not hold budget, right? We're beholden to the sales team's budget or enablement's budget. And because of that, it's really difficult for pre-sales leaders to be able to effectively advocate and communicate the specific value that we bring to the table in order to justify investment, whether it's in a new tool like these or even in headcount, for example, right? Or a retention plan to save that SE who's getting recruited out to a million different organizations like is happening right now. And these tools help provide the visibility, to Chris's point, in terms of where we're adding value in the sales cycle and to what extent, where we can now build those business cases much more effectively to advocate for our organizations, to help prove in an empirical and objective way how critical we are to the organization. We already know we are, but now we have the tools to help us actually show people that that's the case.
So, Karen, let me ask you this then. It seems that the three of us know the value of these different things. I mean, we've tried a lot of the different software that's out there, and they're very useful. But as you were writing the report, was there anything that jumped up and surprised you, like, oh, that's a new revelation that I had never known before? Or was it all, yeah, it sounds about right?
Wow, good question. I think there were certainly capabilities that we've seen across the different focus areas that were really unique, that we hadn't thought of before. I mean, the nice thing about it is this space is pretty brand new. And I'll give you an example. So demo automation, most populous of the categories, almost all of the vendors have very unique approaches to solving the problem, right? Some are cobbling together a set of different video snippets. Some are taking actual graphical screen captures and tying them together. Some are capturing screen captures, but in an animated sense where they're tracking the movement of pixels on the screen. Some are totally replicating the underlying page functionality from an HTML and CSS and PHP and JavaScript perspective, right? So there's so many different approaches to all these problems, and they all have their pros and cons, that I think it was sort of inevitable that there would be really unique stuff that would sort of crop up. And so I think in each of these categories, we've seen some really interesting capabilities. I mean, Chris talks a little bit about how the knowledge management, and I don't want to steal your thunder here, Chris, but the knowledge management space was really interesting in sort of the get back to me problem, in that they can integrate their knowledge libraries directly into any other tool that you're currently using. So if you're in an email and someone sends you an email, you know, how do you do this? I don't have to go find someone else to answer that or send that email off or tell that person I'll get back to you, whatever it is. I can immediately do a text search on exactly what's been sent to that email from within my email client, and it'll pop in the answer that was already been vetted by other folks in the organization, where I know I'm giving the perfect answer right away in seconds. So there's a lot of stuff that we saw that we probably hadn't thought was going to be either present or useful, that was really mind-blowing in terms of how much more productive it can make individual producers and pre-sales leaders.
Chris, did you have a similar experience?
I did, and Ramzi, I think you've heard me reference the quote, the disruptive truth, the term, the disruptive truth, a couple times. It's one of my favorite terms. And look, we uncovered a few disruptive truths ourselves along the way. One of the disruptive truths for me is, and Carrie touched on this a moment ago, demo automation is as much discovery automation as it is demo automation, because really demo automation is designed to provide the sales team more information about what the customer is interested in and what the customer's intents are before the face-to-face meeting, so that when we actually do have the opportunity to give maybe a bespoke demo, a customized demo, that we have insight into who's involved, who's interested, and what are they looking at, right? And we have that without having to have those discovery conversations, because we have that insight. So that was an eye-opener for me. There were two other eye-openers that I think are worth mentioning. The first is that the maturity of the company and the maturity of the product aren't necessarily aligned. What do I mean by that? One of the vendors in our study has a product that is about 10 years old, and yet they're one of the most nascent companies as an organization. So the real takeaway for us, and by the way, again, we were impressed really by all the vendors and all the people and all the products, for varying reasons. But anybody looking at these products, you really need to look at the company, the people behind the company, and the product itself, and avoid making assumptions about one or the other. The other thing that I'll just mention, and Carrie heard me talk about this a lot, and Ramzi, you may recall this about me. Look, I'm a data guy. My background is data, and so the way I make sense of the world is by understanding the data and things like meta model, which I know hopefully there's some people that that may be listening to this that can relate to that. If I say to you, what's the typical meta model in CRM? I bet we would all, if I asked 20 people, we'd get a pretty consistent answer, right? Accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities, right? Some sort of product or, SKU listing. The meta model, quote unquote, in the pre-sales world, even within each of the five subcategories, dramatically different. Let's look at, for example, pre-sales oversight and management, or even individual, or the pre-sales opportunity execution. Just the core object. For some of the products, it's opportunity. For some, it's deal. For some, it's evaluation. For some, it's project. For one of them, I think the term they use is play, right? Some used the concept of milestone. Some use the concept of stage. Some use the concept of phase to mean sort of the different sort of things that we do. The meta model is all over the place, and honestly, I think there's an opportunity in our community, if I can use that word, to begin to standardize on the terms that we use for how we manage our information and data.
Nice. Guys, we're coming up to the end of our time, so I just wanted to ask this. The guide will be coming out in a couple of weeks from the day of the recording. How should people expect to use the guide once they have access to it? And I'll leave that to whoever wants to answer this question. So I'll leave, you guys can figure that out.
Carrie, do you want to take it first?
Sure, I'll jump in. I think the guide is going to be different things to different people. One of the things that is a little bit unique in how we're releasing the guide, and if people would like more information, it's presales-buyersguide.com, is we recognize pretty early on that the big challenge with these types of projects is that invariably they take a long time. We started researching this back in late August, and we're going to release in April. Most of these reports come out, the data's already out of date, especially in a space like ours where the vendors are so new that they're iterating on their products so quickly. And so what we decided not to do was publish a document that was immediately going to be stale dated. And instead, we're releasing the report on the website and allowing vendors on a quarterly basis to provide us with updates where we will actually update their information in the guide. And so people can have confidence that they're coming to the report and come to the website, they're viewing at least somewhat better recent information. The other thing that was interesting was, since we closed off our list of vendors that are going to participate in the fall, we've discovered 7 or 8 new vendors that have popped up since then, right? There's more vendors coming out. This space is exploding and it's really exciting, but I don't want them to have to be shut out necessarily till next year's report. And so we're already calling out some of those, not in a full profile the way that we did with the other ones, but we'll give them the opportunity to engage with us and then be added to the report in sort of a real-time basis as well. So how are organizations, how are users going to use this particular tool? We hope they're going to use it to become a little bit more informed just in terms of not only just the scope of what's out there, but better able to sort of recognize what these focus areas are. The reason we think the focus areas are so important is we think it's going to help pre-sales leaders better frame where they should be focusing their efforts and their investment dollars to solve what are the biggest problems for them internally. Because without that framework, it's really hard to say, what is my biggest problem? I'm not really necessarily sure. And so we really wanted to create sort of this framework to help them make those decisions a little bit easier. And so we're doing a pretty detailed write-up on what each of these focus areas are, to help the leaders identify them and then help them decide which vendors they may want to consider if that's the particular focus area they want to help solve within their business.
So you're not recommending specific vendors. You're just saying these vendors are great at this. They may lack at that. So, and people can make their decision what's important for them.
Great point. We are not doing the market scope plotting the vendors on a grid for market leaders and laggards and things like that. While we're evaluating the vendors in terms of their solutions, their technology, their company, et cetera, we are not grading them in any way, shape, or form. The market is too young, things are changing too quickly, and frankly, we wanted to be as inclusive as possible to give pre-sales buyers the best possible objective information. And so while we did detailed profiles on each vendor and we call out notable features and where their strengths are, we are not plotting them against each other on a chart from that perspective.
And Chris, did you notice that what's important for you is also the same thing that's important for Carrie, or were you kind of like different, have different outlooks on the same possible vendors?
Yeah, really good question. I think we had quite a few similarities, but we also had very different perspectives, and honestly, we were looking for different things. Carrie, my sense is Carrie is a little bit more process oriented or process oriented, as the Canadians say. And I'm more of a data guy. So, and honestly, I mean, that's why I think to a certain degree that's why the subdivision or the division of labor sort of fell the way it did. Certainly the three areas that I worked on are more sort of data focused, data driven, and the as the name suggests, process automation, and the other tools are a little bit more sort of process oriented. You know, there was one more thought that I had, and Carrie touched on this, but I'll sort of emphasize it again, and that is for anyone thinking or considering investing in tools or in automation for their pre-sales team, their pre-sales function, I would encourage people look at the category and understand and consider the categories first. Do you need demo automation and discovery automation? Or do you need to scale your pre-sales more from a structure and best practices perspective, and give your sales engineers a tool that would help them better manage their information and capture their information on a day-to-day perspective, right? And give you as a pre-sales leader visibility into who is working on what, and what are the combination of activities and demo collateral and information that are consistently producing wins, and how can we leverage that to define best practices, right? Those are two very different things. I really would encourage people to start there. And then the only other thought, and this should come as no surprise to anyone, but don't purchase a solution without thinking through your process. Unless you already have or unless you've thought through your process and your methodology and your approach, just buying a tool is not going to magically give you structure, right? If you're just going to automate, right, a potentially broken process to begin with. And of course, like for most of us who sell software, that's what we tell our customers, right? So why should we be any different? But we didn't talk to a lot of the customers of these vendors, but sort of anecdotally, we've talked to a few, and we have in fact heard a few people say, yeah, I mean, we we bought the tool before really thinking through our process, and surprise, surprise, we sort of automated a broken methodology, and it made us really take a step back and rethink things. So that was my final thought.
That's great. For some reason, the thought that popped in my head as you were speaking is automating chaos, basically.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, this has been great. We're at the end of our time. I really appreciate both of you being here and talking about this. And you already said the website, Carrie, but you want to say it again, just in case people missed it the first time. Where can they go in and find this guide?
presales-buyersguide.com. We will be releasing in a couple weeks, sort of mid-April, for people watching the recording. For those that want to check it out beforehand, go online to the site, sign up for our newsletter, and you will be notified when we do launch.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for being here. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for having us, Ramzi.
See you.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Carrie, for coming on again. It was great talking to you. So I'd be curious to hear what everybody thought about the different subcategories. The fact that some of the vendors that they're working with who sell to pre-sales have some work to do in terms of getting better at their messaging to pre-sales and that sort of thing. I just thought that was funny. And I am very curious to see what their demos looked like. So yeah, that's it. In case you're wondering, on a side note, by the way, very bad segue. I did do a soft launch of the pre-sales hotline, this SE hotline, or whatever you want to call it, the hotline for sales engineer individuals. I spend a lot of time talking to people through LinkedIn, through Slack, helping them out. And it was not scalable. It's just too many people to try to answer. So I did create a service where people can sign up, get assigned a coach. Right now it's me because there's no other coaches out there. Well, there's a lot of people who are interested. Just I want to make sure that I get everything up and running before we start adding coaches to the service. So, and you get assigned a coach. We build a curriculum based on what you guys need, whether it's getting better at discovery, finding a job, moving jobs, getting better at demos, whatever it is, we'll build that curriculum and start working towards that. I'll leave a link in the show notes to that beta site. So I'm looking for founding members, founding clients to help me streamline the business or help me streamline access and the process, the experience that users would have. So if you're interested, you can check out the link. You can ping me on LinkedIn. You can email me, whatever it is that you need to do. I will see you next time. With that, this is Ramzi signing off.